Welcome back to day 2 of reading the Omnivore's Dilemma together. We're on to chapter 2, which is the farm section. And we're actually going to read the first 2 sections of this chapter on this first video, since the very first one is very short. So the first one is called One Farmer, 140 Eaters, and the second one is called The Far End of the Food Chain. Those are the 2 sections we're going to cover. One farmer, 140 eaters. It was the first week of May, and I was at the wheel of a clattering 1975 International Harvester tractor, dragging a spidery machine called an 8-row planter, which dropped corn seeds into the earth. Driving over that field was like trying to steer a boat through a sea of dark chocolate. The hard part was keeping the thing on a straight line. If you mess up, your rows will wobble, overlapping or spreading apart. Your neighbors will laugh, and, worst of all, you will not be able to plant as much corn. The tractor I was driving belonged to George Naylor, a big man with a moon face and a scraggly gray beard. He sat next to me as I drove and tried to shout instructions over the diesel roar. He had on the farmer's usual baseball cap, a yellow shirt, and overalls, the stripy blue kind worn by railroad workers. The field was part of Naylor's farm, 470 acres in Greene County, Iowa. Naylor had been working the farm for more than 30 years, since he took it over from his father in the mid-1970s. This part of Iowa has some of the richest topsoil in the world, a layer nearly 2 feet thick. It was laid down over 10,000 years ago by retreating glaciers. Tall grass prairie grew here until the mid-1800s, when the sod was first broken by the settler's plow. George's grandfather moved his family to Iowa from Derbyshire, England, in the 1880s. The sight of such soil, curling behind the blade of his plow, must have made him feel happy and confident. It's gorgeous stuff. Black gold as deep as you can dig, as far as you can see. Section 2. The Far End of the Food Chain. Back in 1919, when the Naylors bought this land, farming was very different, and so was the Naylor farm. All sorts of crops grew here, corn, but also fruits and other vegetables, as well as oats, hay, and alfalfa to feed the pigs, cattle, chickens, and horses. Horses were the tractors of that time. Back then, the average farmer grew enough food to feed 12 other Americans. Less than a century later, the picture is very different. Corn has muscled out most of the other plants and animals. The sheep, chickens, pigs, and horses are gone. So are most of the fruits and vegetables. George Naylor grows only 2 crops on his 470 acres, corn and soybeans. Corn has even pushed most of the people off the farm. Out of 300 million Americans, only 2 million are still farmers. That means the average American farmer today grows enough food to feed 140 other people. The 140 people who depend on George Naylor for their food are all strangers. Like me, they live at the far end of a food chain that is long and complicated. George Naylor doesn't know the people he is feeding, and they don't know him. I came to the Naylor farm as an unelected representative of the 140 people he feeds. I was curious to learn whom and what I'd find at the far end of the food chain that keeps me alive. Of course, I had no way of knowing if it was George or some other farmer who grows the corn that feeds the steer that becomes my steak. That's the nature of the industrial food chain. But I knew that a Midwest cornfield, just like George Naylor's, is the place most of our food comes from.